When Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott visited Indonesia a few weeks ago, business engagement was his top priority. But according to experts who addressed a conference of Australian and Indonesian youth in Canberra, Australia is being left behind, and if business does not act soon, it will be too late to catch up with the likes of Japan, Korea and France. Two of the speakers were young Indonesian finance expert Harsya Prasetyo and Debnath Guharoy, Regional Director for Asia Pacific for the Roy Morgan Research Group. They spoke to political editor Catherine McGrath.
Harsya Prasetyo, Debnath Guharoy, thank you very much for speaking to us.
Pleasure.
Harsya, you're working in the finance sector in Jakarta. In the run-up to the election and post the global financial crisis, how is the economy travelling in Indonesia?
Okay. It's been travelling very, very fast now. Post-2008, going into 09, 10, 11, 12, and now 13, the economy has been growing very, very fast. We're talking about 5%. Yes, we get hit in 2008, but we're talking about 5%-ish. And then we are hitting at about 6%-ish in 10, 11, and 12, which is fascinating. Very, very strong growth. So getting into 2013, the macroeconomic condition in Indonesia, there was a challenge. Challenge in terms of net export, where we are importing more than we are exporting. So 2013 came, Indonesia is set to fix that deficit by raising the fuel price hike, by raising the fuel price. Unfortunately, the decision to increase the fuel price happened a bit slow because a lot of political things are going on in there. But once we did that, we see now that the economy is actually growing in a healthier way.
Now, you're both here in Australia to participate in a forum on Australian-Indonesian relations. Debnath, you are a Melburnian working in Asia for the last 2 decades, now also based in Jakarta. We've heard there an update on the Indonesian economy. You work for Roy Morgan Research, you're the head of the Asia Pacific division. How in touch are Australians to the Indonesian economic story?
Not very. I think that's the best way to put it. In mining and resources, every big Australian business knows exactly what the lay of the land is. They're there and they will be there. But the two countries aren't engaging. The two peoples are disengaged, know very little really about each other. On the other hand, if you look at market opportunities, if you look at Indonesia from any perspective, whether it's security, biosecurity, politics, economics, you cannot ignore the 15th largest economy in the world at your doorstep.
So what are the barriers now for Australian businesses and the Australian community?
Much is made of barriers in Indonesia, and as I'm fond of saying, the whole world is there. How come Australia isn't?
Really? So what other countries are doing better than Australia?
So if you take, for example, a country like France, they have no connection geographically, culturally, historically with Indonesia. Yet you take a brand name, a French brand name, a European brand name like Carrefour in retail, and they're there. The brand names there in neon. You have Peugeot now trying to build their market share, and that's big business. You know, a car company entering a new market. You've got Total, the French oil company, not just in exploration, but then in retail, in petrol retail. And you see Total all over Jakarta today and beyond.
So what are Australian businesses doing wrong if they're not there as well?
To be very honest, I think life's very good in Australia. Life's kind of hard when you work the marketplace in Indonesia. I can see this for myself because after doing 3 weeks in Jakarta, I sort of want to come back to my Melbourne home. I understand that. But we've got to stop saying that it's too hard, because we have a neighbor with whom we have issues that are historically built on ignorance or fear or both. We need to engage.
Harsya, what's your view?
If Carrefour is there, where is Coles, right? If Carrefour is there, where is Woolworths, for example, right? It is something that Australians are currently missing out.
Yet, on the other hand, we measure this of preferred country of manufacture from an Indonesian consumer perspective. Japan's number 1, China's number 2, and Australia's number 3, even though it is virtually invisible in the consumer economy.
Debnath, what do you think of the Australian media's understanding and portrayal of the complex life in Indonesia, the complex political life, business life?
I think Australian media, by and large, is in a time warp of its own. It is stuck way back 20 years ago, in the time of the dictatorship. The fact that we have a blossoming democracy, where I would say to you, and we can argue about this, there is probably greater freedom of press there than there is in Australia today.
Why do you say that?
All right.
That sounds extreme.
One man owns 67% of all media outlets in Australia. That's a number. So when you have the capacity of one organization to keep massaging the minds of an entire country, what price democracy?
I think Pak Debnath is absolutely right. In Indonesia now, the flow of information is just so amazingly fast. We are one of the biggest social media users. We're talking about Twitter, we're talking about Facebook. So even if the Indonesians do not like the media, the media that they have, we can still use the soft med. And the social med actually makes the content and the speed of the information goes very, very fast.
So one final question to you both very briefly, if I can. What's going to happen economically to Australian businesses if they don't get to Jakarta and get noticed and get involved?
Okay, I think Australian businesses will get left behind more and more, right? The Japanese brands, the Korean brands will dominate the Indonesian consumer market going forward, and Indonesian consumer market, on the other hand, is very, very big. It's 43 million people now who are consuming class. It will be 130 million people later, I think in 2030. So if we missed out, if Australian business missed out, it's what we call in bahasa Indonesia sayang.
Sayang.
Yeah, sayang.
Well, we measure consumer confidence in exactly the same way as we do in Australia and in Indonesia. We're currently the best performing OECD country in the developed world, and we're running at 122 on that index. In Indonesia, for the last 3 years and more, that same indicator has been between 135 and 155, 3 straight years. And despite the fuel price hike of June, that's amazing. That tells you the voracious appetite of the Indonesian consumer, no matter what.
Harsya Prasetyo, Debnath Guharoy, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening.
Pleasure.
Pleasure.